Now is Wilson Erumebor, who is an economist with the NESG. Okay, Wilson, how are you? I
Yeah,
can
I'm good,
see you.
Nancy.
Good,
Thank you for having me.
good morning from Abuja.
Good morning.
Uh,
Good morning.
please, Wilson, I will need you to readjust the position of your camera because I can see I'm just seeing only your headshot. Okay, I think we'll need to readjust that, then we'll come back. Okay, I think it's a bit, yes,
Is it
better
better?
now. Yes, better. So, Wilson, let's get it on the road. What exactly is happening? The data is coming out from the National Bureau of Statistics. I must say that the, I'm not speaking for them, but shouldn't they be commended?
Mhm.
At least the MBS we've seen under Dr. Yemi Kale in the last few years, unlike what we had before. Let's start from there.
Yes, absolutely. I think we've made so much progress looking at where we're coming from as far as gathering data is concerned. So this is not just socioeconomic data. This is also looking at macroeconomic data, data on public debt, and so many different aspects of the economy. And of course, I remember those days back then when if you had to look for data, sometimes you get them in PDF format, and you have to start typing and typing, and these days it's a lot more easier. The fact that you have Excel spreadsheets, you can make calculations, by yourself. You can, plot trends and examine different patterns across all the data sets. So I think there's been so much remarkable progress looking at where we're coming from. Yes, there's still challenges. The fact that things like survey and data on unemployment, for instance, hasn't been updated. The latest was in 2018 third quarter. So some of those challenges, of course, are beyond I'd say the NBS control. So there are issues that has to do with funding, managing of resources, and all that. So I think yes, we've made progress, and I think from a national level, maybe from a governance, a country management level, I think we still need to prioritize much more data, particularly in terms of frequency, ensuring that some key data also come out, at relevant times, because data, of course, is useful for planning. If we don't know, as at now, how many people are employed and what's the employment rate and trends, I mean, how do we even solve unemployment? How do we know we're making progress in that regard? So, yes, so much progress. And at the same time, I think there's still a lot more to do.
Yeah, still a lot more to do. A lot of people are saying that perhaps data is the new oil. And like I always say, what you can measure, you can manage. So
Yeah.
data is really a key at this point in time. Though some people have also questioned not just the integrity of the data churned out by the NBS, their methodology and all of that. But I think they've been able to stand, at least in the last few years, to debunk some of that. That is not just about data to favor the government or the government in power or whatsoever administration it is. Okay, let's go into the details, the devil inside the details this time, or is it the angel inside the details now? Um, Consumption pattern in Nigeria. How important is this data? Just before you came up, during the beginning of the program, I did tell our viewers some of the things we showed there, then also the graphics. Nigerians spent this 40.2 trillion naira on that's household expenditure from September
Yeah.
2018 to October 2019. Speak to me about how important this data is. What does it tell
So what
us?
data So what data like this tells us, so there are different levels, different angles to it. The first thing is the fact that it can help us in terms of policy areas to know, okay, for instance, what are areas that people spend money on? How can we, what is even the level of spending? Is it high? Is it low for a country like Nigeria? Should we be spending this much on food, or is it even this much? Is it even small? As a percentage of total expenditure, as a percentage of even GDP. What do other benchmark countries spend? How can we increase, not necessarily as a target, how can we increase income? Because, of course, as income increases in a country, as people make progress, you get to see that some of these shares as to what you spend on food and non-food begin to adjust automatically. So I think it's useful for planning from a policy perspective, which I believe we will discuss much in detail. And I also think it's also for businesses. For instance, you can then identify what trends do we have, what is the state of consumer spending in Nigeria, what are the areas that people spend money on, and how can we, how can a business or an individual take advantage of some of these opportunities to see, how you can make profit, and at the same time how you can solve solutions. So there's so two major angles to it, from a policy side and then
the
from a business
side.
opportunities aspect. Yeah.
Let's take from the policy side. How important is
Yeah.
it on a policy side? And the big part of my question is, do you think that the government is given adequate attention to data when it's being published? Take a look at this now, the consumption pattern. Don't also forget that we also had the poverty data that was just released a few days ago, showing us that about 40% of Nigerians are indeed living below the poverty line, $1.90 a day. So how much attention are we getting from the government to this kind of data? Take a look at, we're fighting the pandemic, for example. The government is going and giving, I don't want to call it palliatives because that's not what it is. It's about conditional cash transfer, just giving it to those that they need to give. But you understand what I mean? So how can government also use these kind of data that is being published by the National Bureau of Statistics to get their work done well? And the policy side, so it's two in one.
Yes. So from the policy, or I would say development perspective, so we've seen cases where, I mean, it's established in economic theory and even in practice that, like I mentioned earlier, as a country develops, so as people become more wealthy, the share of what you spend on food reduces as a total share of your consumption. So in the sense, so you look at country like, so it doesn't necessarily mean the value of what you spend on food increase, because it has to decrease, because they are two different things. So your absolute value of food increases as you become wealthy, because you have, much more taste, and then you can, start consuming expensive, maybe bottle of wine, and, but then you won't spend a significant share of your income on food. So you'd want to, make investments, buy houses, cars, and a lot of that. Those things, have more cost items. So what this means is that, so if you look at what we have, the data we have now, 57% of what we spend in Nigeria is on food, while the non-food item has 43%. So what this tells you is that, we spend a lot more on food. So from that development perspective, there's a lot more that we can do to see how we can begin to shift that share. So for instance, government policies has to look at how do you increase income? So for instance, creating jobs. Jobs is definitely one of the ways out of poverty. Providing people with jobs, opportunities, skills development, and all that. So policies need to see how we can make that business environment a bit more friendly, so that investors and private sector can make that investment, create jobs, and employ more people. On the second hand is to look at issues around skills development. So do we have a national, or do we need to start thinking of having national or regional skills program that can, working with the private sector, that can see how people can, impact and be productive to the economy and solve certain number of problems. So I think the goal here should be, from a government perspective, how can we increase income of our citizens? And mind you, so in summary, what basically this means is, so those countries that spend more of their income on food, or expenditure on food, means it's more like running a survival economy from a development perspective. Like you people want to survive, so they have to eat. So that's on the government side. And lastly, I would also make the point that it's very important that data such as this is incorporated into planning, because if you look at regional levels, there's a pattern that shows, with the poverty report that released, that shows that states that spend more on education, states that are more developed, spend more on education, and that's very clear from this report. So if you look at the South and the Southwest, most of education accounts for like the second biggest item of their spending, and we're talking about individual citizens within these states, not just government alone. So there's a clear pattern that the way poverty is ranked across the region, from high to low, from low to high, you have the southwest, the south, southeast, north central, northwest, and northeast. That same pattern follows as to how we prioritize spending on education across the different regions. So these kinds of data should provide insights. And So the question is, are we as government really, is our government really ready to incorporate some of these into the decision-making process? And I think that's the big question that we need to keep advocating for and pushing that. How can we make sense of this data and see how we can incorporate it into planning?
Okay, from a business perspective, for those of us that saw that data, or the data rather, because it's still on the website of the NBS. So for those watching us, you can actually go to the website of the National Bureau of Statistics, and you get the data. For those that have seen the data and perhaps want to take a business advantage of it, what is the data clearly telling us?
Well, it tells you that the opportunities are enormous in the country, especially with regards to food consumption, food expenditure. So 23 trillion. So you may want to, if you do as a percentage of real GDP, that's about 32% of real GDP. So you can imagine, even yes, with a recession looming, the fact that that consumption, that 23 trillion, would likely shrink a little this year. But it still doesn't mean that there are not opportunities for businesses and individuals to take advantage of. Imagine having, as an individual or a business, controlling 0.1% or even 0.1% of 23 trillion. That's about, would I say, 230 billion naira as revenue for you. Or, I mean, so it tells you that the fact that people still spend on these items shows that there's clear opportunities for business. So the other thing that is very clear, the other opportunity that is very clear, is the fact that some of these consumptions are imported. So some of these items that we spend money on, they are not all produced within Nigeria. So you have imports coming in. And with a recession coming on board or looming, so it definitely means that there will be so much pressure on the exchange rate. More likely, the CBN would start, rationing, trying to limit import of certain goods that we have the potential or the capacity to produce locally. So as a business person or an individual who is interested in taking advantage of such opportunity, this presents the fact that how can you start producing those things, those items that you think we would need to start producing locally because of the advantages of or government policy tilting towards discouraging import and supporting local production in that sense. So as an example, let me take one of the crops, vegetables, for instance. We from the data, we spent about 2 trillion naira or thereabouts
about
on
1.7 trillion, yes.
1.7, 1.8, approximately yes. 2 trillion naira on vegetables. So if you look at the import data from the NBS, about close to 600 billion, I think the precise figure is about 585 billion naira was imported. So, I mean, we import vegetables worth 585 billion. That in itself tells you that, because import shows that there's demand for that product. So that tells you that there are so many opportunities that some of these things can be produced locally within the economy. So I think as businesses and individuals interested in business, there's so many opportunities that this can provide.
Let's also try as much as possible to break this down with the with the amount of time that we have, because we just have a few minutes. I wish I can do this. I will do it again. Not I wish. I will do this again so that I'll break down the numbers the more. Food consumed outside of home, 4.9 trillion naira between September 2018 and October 2019. Who is eating outside the home, and we are poor? So what does it entail? Are we all? Is it junk food? Is it the mama puts by the side of the road? Is it the bukas, the restaurants, the canteens, and all of that?
Yes, you've said it all. So it's about 4.6 trillion, the largest in all categories, but especially even when you add non-food. Also the largest across so many states. So if you look at the data from a state level, this food consumer outside of home accounts for the largest. So it basically looks at things like breakfast, dinner, lunch, those things you order, those things you go out to buy.
All those people selling noodles on the road, inclusive.
Yes, exactly. So with the type of system we run, it's very, so many people consume outside. It's very easy to go outside and buy one or two things and eat. Even if, I mean, take a viewing center, for instance, where people watch matches. You go there, you want to watch a match, you have to buy food or buy some drinks and all that. So that is a very huge market. The restaurant, the retail segment, it's a booming sector in Nigeria. And one thing is, irrespective of whether there is an economic decline, so that segment, you will always, it's always booming. People, yes, maybe at some point you might experience some level of stability or decline, but there's always that potential and opportunity for businesses that operate within that space.
Let's take a look at alcohol. I'm seeing 150.2 billion naira the Nigerians spent within the period. Also look at coffee, tea. I think we were chatting earlier on, I think some days ago, we were chatting, and when I looked at the data, I was like, okay, Nigerians are spending 296.59 billion naira on coffee, tea, cocoa, and the likes. That's the other beverages. And what came to my mind is a high percentage of this are the sachet ones, the ones that come in sachet that are easily affordable.
Yes, that's absolutely correct, because these things are things that, I mean, they are not expensive. So sometimes you have them for 50 naira, 100 naira. But in terms of volume, they sell more. So people, and it's consumed across the different classes. So you have a family, a household of 4 or 5 people. For alcohol, it's not, there's certain age limits. Okay, not younger people below 10 years old, below 15 years old don't consume alcohol. So, but for those items like the sachet and the coffee, the tea, in particular, some of the brands, that are dominant in the market, milk and all that, those things take a significant part of, people spend more on them because they are not expensive, but then in terms of volume, so you get to see more people buy. And I think somebody even pointed out when we were, conversing on Twitter that how come Nigerians spend less on alcohol and more on those items. But another point to note is that so under the food consumed outside of home, so you have 4.6 trillion. That also includes spending on alcohol itself. So because when you go out to consume, you buy alcohol. So there's a share of alcohol consumption that would be categorized under that food consumed outside of home. Yeah, so you made the 150 billion that you pointed out may not be the total consumption of alcohol, total amount spent on alcohol. There could be some amounts captured under the food consumed outside home.
Alcoholic drink, bottle and cans, 150.2 billion.
Yes.
But let's go over to household expenditure by states. Very interesting. Lagos is topping that list with about 5.06 trillion naira. And also the other part is that Lagos state expenditure on non-food items was more than in the expenditure on food. What is happening? You're a Lagosian. What are you guys spending your money on? Where's FCT here so that we know where we stand here? FCT, we'll come to that in a bit, but just answer.
FCT is somewhere in the middle.
Yes, it's somewhere in the middle. I can see that.
So what Lagos, for Lagos, so like I explained earlier, the level of income and wealth within a certain environment also has a factor to play. What Lagosians spend most is, if you look at the breakdown, is food outside of home. That's one. And then the second is on transport. So transportation is one big item that consumes a lot in Lagos. After transport, you then have rent and services. So that tells you that so as people have more income, they spend less on food and more on non-food items. So that's why I think it's just 2 states that recorded that, Lagos and Imo. So Imo's non-food expenditure is higher than its food expenditure. So Imo, in short, spends the highest on healthcare in total, and then on starchy foods, and then food outside of home. So looking at these trends can even point to you that where are areas of opportunities for policy? Where can policy come in? How can we begin to bring out regions that are lagging behind, or states that are not really lagging behind? Even as a state governor, how can we automatically, the goal should not be to say, I want to increase spending on non-food items. That should not be the target. Rather, the target should not be, I want to increase spending on non-food items over food items. The target should be increasing income level of citizens. The moment you do that, automatically spending habits will definitely adjust to that.
Okay, finally, Wilson, I wish we could go on and on, but like I said, we'll continue the discuss another time. What do you have to say? Because if we're taking a look at the state ranking, what I also noticed from the NBS report is that we have many of the northern states below. I don't know if you noticed that. FCT is in the middle, like you said, number 16. Then other northern states fall with just a few of some southern states. What does it tell us, really?
Well, I think it's a development issue, and it's something that is across all the different levels of data. So the poverty data shows the same thing. And let me move a bit to the poverty data, because that
very
also
quickly,
gives insight.
Wilson. Yeah, we need to go.
So if you look at the poverty data, the highest households that are have over 20 people, poverty rate within that household is about 50%. While a small household of 2 to 4 people, you have about 8% poverty rate. So that tells you that, first of all, population, not just population, the fact that you have so many dependent people within a family has a key role to play. The other is on spending on education, and I think that's also very key. So because of time, I'll just...
Wilson, thank you very much. We'll continue some other time. We'll break down the numbers, because so many things to chew from this report, and even the other report, the poverty report. Thank you very much for joining me this morning.